We spend far too much time worried about what makes us different than the next person or better than the next person, and not enough time thinking about why we should respect the next person. We all have a story, an overarching theme that runs through our lives and makes us who we are. The problem is, we think that since each of our stories is different, there's not a lot of perceived value or shared struggle. But we have far more in common than we can imagine, and what motivates one person can certainly help us as well. The Third Lap podcast is about understanding, respecting, and appreciating the struggle that it takes to overcome immeasurable odds in order to reach your destiny. Join me as I interview and bond with some of the most inspiring and incredible people, diving into their why to get a full understanding of their being. Without each other, we have nothing. So let's go on this adventure together and take on the future with open minds and open hearts. Welcome to the Third Lap podcast. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Third Lap podcast. I am your host, Mal Davis. I'm trying to do a better job of actually introducing myself because I rarely ever say my name, but I am Mal. I'm here joined by the homie, Mark Drumheller, man, who we'll get into how I know him in a second, but so he is a sports betting aficionado, writes for Yahoo Sportsbook, also produces content for Fox Gambler and the Shark app. He's also a father and a partner. Just all around real dope dude, man. You know, anytime he produces something around sports betting, oh man, I try to lock it in. Trying to get better, Mark. But yeah, man, welcome to the show, my brother. How's everything?
Everything's great, man. Thanks for having me. Would be a little bit better if our local sports teams were doing a little bit better, but it's that type of season. We're gonna fight it out and see where we end up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how I know Mark, we actually met through Fourth and John. So I had Gail Saunders on here before. He was one of the early episodes of the Third Lap. And so met Mark through Gail. You know, we started following each other on Twitter, kicked it, talk back and forth. Like I said, man, anytime I see Mark produce content, I lock it. And I actually just read your Yahoo article that you just produced around teams that have been losing, but you should be looking to like place bets on. You're talking about just people on the hot seat, players that weren't available this week that are available this coming week, and all of these different things. And so, yeah, man, I'm gonna get on that FanDuel app, like a couple of these things in, get my prop bets going. I lost like $30 this week. I didn't do so well, but I'm hoping that this week would be a better one. So yeah, man. And then how we know each other, like I said, also through just being Eagles fans. And yeah, anything you want to add in regards to how we know each other?
No, I mean, it's just through Fourth and John. And, you talked about Gail, and Gail's really, does an incredible job with that group over there. And, what he's doing of being a part of the Eagles community. He's been kind of like a mentor to me in a lot of ways. I kind of always check, just to kind of talk about our careers and sports media and kind of, how to make moves. And he's always on point, always gives great advice. So appreciate Gail, man. And, I met a great group of people, yourself and so many other good people through Fourth and John. Hey, excited to be here, man. Excited to do this show with you. It's good to link up again.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, definitely shout outs to the Fourth and John team. Shout outs to Gail, same, just been a mentor for me, somebody that I always just check in with periodically, whenever I have something going on, or just to check in is to see how he's doing, because he's just an all-around great person. And so there's the Rep Your Hood section, Mark. You already talked about the local sports team, so I think it kind of tipped your cap a little bit in regards to where you're from. But yeah, Rep Your Hood, Mark. Where you coming from, man?
Yeah, Philadelphia, man. And I've been here my whole life, following the teams all the way back from, Kelly Green and, back in the early 80s is when I grew up. I'm kind of dating myself, but those teams were not good then. And I think that kind of made me who I am as a fan, and kind of understanding that, hey, the team's not going to be good. You root for them anyway. You kind of fight through it. And, the past, I would say 2 decades, probably we've been pretty, lucky as far as the team's been competitive. They've been in the playoff hunt, but now it looks like, at least with the Eagles, it's going to be a little of the childhood memories coming back, where they're going to kind of struggle a little bit for a couple of years. And hopefully it's not too long before they turn it around.
Yeah, I think we really got spoiled with the Andy Reid era, right? Consistently in the NFC Championship game, consistently in the playoffs, thank God for that Super Bowl in 2017 because I would be super miserable right now. But yeah, Eagles, I expected the struggle. Ben Simmons and all the 76er stuff, oh man, it's killing me right now. Him getting suspended and just his trade value is as low as it possibly can be. So I don't know who we're gonna trade him for, but hopefully they can get that situated. But yeah, like you said, you learn to still cheer for the team and really love the team through the struggles. If you're an Eagles fan, you've seen the ups, you've seen the downs. So we cheer for the team. We go hard for the city, man. Yeah. So shouts out to Philadelphia. And so Mark, this is really my chance. So you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say that's just how we grew up. Like if
Yeah.
win or lose, like we just root for the teams. Like I remember when I was young, and I want to say, gosh, it was back in the Buddy Ryan era, and they lost another playoff game to the Redskins, or Washington football team now. But and I was so frustrated. I remember I was over at my buddy's house, and his dad and all his friends were drinking all day, and they were partying, and they made like a bonfire in the front yard, and they were throwing all their Eagles gear in it. And they're like, we're done with this team, because they were so frustrated with, the Buddy Ryan era was like, hey, we're finally winners at that point. Like, we can finally make the playoffs, and they would lose first round every time. And I remember them just burning all their stuff, and I threw my hat in as a kid. And I remember then I went home and I watched Action News, and they were interviewing like little kids in the city, and they were so happy and excited, even though they just got crushed. And they were just like, that's all right, we're going to be back rooting for them next year. And I was like, man, I got to be like this kid, not like, throwing my stuff in the fire. So that, the disdain for the team only lasted a couple hours, and we got right back on it. But that's just how it was growing up, man. So we're going to take some lumps this year, but happy to do it. We'll keep fighting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been telling my wife every Sunday for years now that I'm not watching next Sunday. And then that next Sunday game rolls around, and my wife is just looking at me
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you turning it on. Like, listen, you knew I was lying when I said it. That was just frustration. And so, you mentioned being a little homie. So that transitions well into like the next segment here, which is me really, having an opportunity to turn the podcast pretty much over to you. Just to give folks a better background of like who you are, and how you ended up sort of where you are currently. And so, feel free to start the story wherever you want to. Folks start usually end of high school going into college, and the college going into the professional working world. But some folks I had a homie start at 40, work backwards, homie start at birth, work forward. So yeah, it's really up to you, man. Where would you say your story begins?
Yeah, I mean, always was a huge fan of sports, and always, going back to as a little kid, had the newspaper out and looking at the stats in the newspaper, right? Trying to figure out who the best players were, and trading cards, and going back to then. And I was always kind of obsessed with, what makes teams win, and how they win in that way. Because there were so many instances, like we'll take the Eagles, for example, where they sign a free agent and it's a big name and you get excited, like Herschel Walker. And then you find out like, hey, why don't they win? Right. So always obsessed with stats and trying to figure out, what makes teams win, what stats are valuable, what stats are not. And then eventually, as I got into college, we got into sports betting. Back then it was, pools and, stuff like that. It wasn't really, on the mobile app like it is now. And that just kind of brought me into the world of just, being so passionate about sports and passionate about the teams. Unfortunately, when I was in college at Rowan, like I didn't pursue, broadcasting or anything of that nature. I was just kind of doing what my advisors advised me to do back then, and got a marketing degree, got out of college, went into that industry, and worked a full-time job. But on the side, I always have tried to do everything I can to just be involved with sports. And that started with writing with, Fourth and John. And I started podcasting with Wildfire Radio back in, gosh, it's probably over a decade, but it was back, during the Chip Kelly era and all that. I remember we did our first episode, had to be close to 10 years ago, and just grinding out episodes every week and talking about sports. And from that point, it just really took off. It was just like, hey, this is what I wanted to do. I want to talk about sports as much as I can. And that led to writing opportunities, with Fourth and John. I got linked up with Sean Brace at Philly Influencer. And then he started the Fox Sports The Gambler about 2 years ago, which is solely focused on gambling. So, I got part of that team. I'm on there During the week, you can hear me at nights, doing hits for them, just kind of talking about gambling and whatnot, and the sports teams in the area. And from there, that kind of took off. I just kind of immersed myself in making content, making sports gambling content, and that led to my opportunities with Yahoo and with the Sharp app now. And the Sharp app is pretty much a sports betting app that gives you, odds tracking and bet comparison. And they have a subscription service where you can get tools to, all the models that they use and things like that. But ultimately, it was just really like an obsession with sports and obsession with my team and trying to figure out how they win. And that kind of turned itself into sports betting and turned itself into like, okay, like how do I predict outcomes? How do I predict things that are going to happen on the field? And it all just kind of took off from there. It just kind of one thing funneled into another and just led to some good opportunities. But you know the deal. It's you're out there hustling and you're making content and you're trying to do the best you can, and you just look for an opportunity and then you try and pounce on it when you get it.
Absolutely. And the opportunity that you pounced on was sports betting, right? Which, I think used to be some nefarious sort of thing. People felt like, yeah, I gotta it's bookies, and if I don't place my bets right, they break my kneecaps. And then now, it's become very mainstream. This is something that a lot of states are pushing for additional revenue, and you have FanDuel and all of these other opportunities, the Sharp app, like you mentioned. So talk to us, man. First, I would love if you could sort of like dispel some of these notions or myths around sports betting, but then also, if people are looking to get into sports betting, what are some of the suggestions that you provide? Like, where would you say people should start if they're trying to really get their feet wet and better understand sports betting?
Yeah, it's just like anything else, right? So, sports betting is a great element to sports from a fan's perspective, right? It's sort of like how fantasy football is. Like you enjoy the game, you're more invested in the game and whatnot. And like anything else in life, there's moderation that has to be involved, right? And you have to be careful. And I think that's really the best thing about, sports betting becoming mainstream and these sports apps, on your phone or whatnot, whether it's DraftKings or FanDuel or BetMGM or PointsBet or whoever, there's a very low minimal bet. So you can bet 50 cents on the game if you wanted to, right? It's really tailored to where like you do it, within your means. And it's kind of like, a lot of people do it for entertainment. And if it's done for that, like it's fine. Like, if you're going to go to a game and, or go out to a bar and watch a game and, you want to put $20 on the game or $10 on the game or $5 on the game, it could be just part of your cost for entertainment for that night, whether you're, going out and buying food and drinks or you're, putting a couple dollars on the game. But it's all about doing it, within your means, kind of setting aside a certain amount that you're going to do it. And then when you use up that amount, you use up your bankroll, you're done, and that's the kind of key is to make sure that, you're doing it responsibly. Just sort of like anything else. And that wasn't an option back in the day. Like when we were, betting through bookies and things like that, like they would only take minimum amount, like, there was a minimum amount that they would take. So you couldn't call up and be like, hey, I wanted to put $5 on this game. Like they're not going to take your bet. So it wouldn't be worth their time. So you'd have to have a bigger investment. So I think that's a positive. And I think a lot of the sports betting shows that are out there do a good job of kind of, communicating that with the audience is that you want to bet within your bankroll. I know a lot of sports betting shows that talk about, hey, you want to set an amount aside for the season. And if that amount, how many games you want to bet a week, how many games, you want to bet on. So you can kind of do the math and, hey, if it means that your bet's going to be $5 a game, then that's what your bet is, but make a projection of what you want to spend on the season and then work backwards into what you should be making for your individual bet. So that way you're never losing, too much or it's not getting out of control or anything like that. And that's really the important. There's a personal responsibility, but I think it is great that it's becoming more mainstream and, because people enjoy it. And as long as, people can do it responsibly and, the sports betting apps are allowing it to do it, responsibly, I think it all makes sense. And it's good it's a lot easier now that we can do this from, our phones than before back in the day, having to call bookies and go behind the alley and collect your money and things like that. So, I'm really excited about where it's heading. It's becoming ingrained in the broadcast, with the stations and whatnot. And it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
Hey, everybody. So I have some really exciting news. the Third Lab podcast is actually expanding. And so I'm in the process of putting together a co-author book called The Third Lab: Transformational Stories of Life Experiences That Make Us Better. And this is a great opportunity for anyone that's looking to get published for the first time, or if you've been published before, this is a great opportunity to, well, not have to write a whole book yourself. And so if you're interested in learning more about the product, the program, the opportunity, feel free to reach out to me at maldavis21@gmail.com, or feel free to reach out to me through the socials for the Third Lab. Really excited about this program, really excited about this opportunity, and really excited for you all to come and join me. So again, if you have any questions, want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Each one, teach one. We all learn together. Peace. Yeah, in regards to like it becoming ingrained. So I follow Fantasy Pros. Like I've been on Fantasy Pros Roto World for years for fantasy football. And so Pros does their like weekly breakdown of the games. And they've even started to implement, who should you be utilizing for DFS? Like, who's the good better, who's a good value for DFS? And I thought that was really interesting because up until this year, I hadn't really noticed that. And so, you're seeing it start to like ingrain itself much more in a lot of the fantasy work, even if it's season long stuff versus the DFS daily fantasy sports. And so also wanted to just address some of the terminology that people may come across, because that was sort
Hmm.
of what tripped me up at first, right? And so like betting the spread, parlays, prop bets, like, what are these things? When people see these terms, and, the article that you had on Yahoo, which I was reading earlier, was talking a lot about the spread and like the shifting of the spread. What do these things mean? If somebody's looking to bet against the spread versus if somebody's like playing prop bets, like what are those things?
Yeah. So when you can place a wager on a specific team, like we'll take the Eagles, for instance, right? Let's say the Eagles, they're playing the Raiders this weekend, right? So the spread on that game is -3, which means that because the Raiders are the favorite team, if you're going to bet the Raiders, you have to win by more than 3 in order for you to win your wager. So that's really where that comes from. And you'll see those fluctuate from, as little as half a point all the way up to, it could be 16, 17 points. Like I think Arizona and Houston is a good example this week. I think that's up to like 17 and a half. So that's a way for, the books to kind of make it even. Now you can also place money line bets, which you'll see where it's just straight up whether you want to win or lose. So if you want to bet the team to win, you can just do it on the money line, not have to worry about the spread. Now those odds are going to reflect how strong one team is in comparison to another. So you might see the Eagles, if they're the underdogs, they could be +130, which means, hey, if you bet, $10, you would win 13. You bet $100, you would win 130. If you're betting the favorite, it's obviously, you're going to have to bet more to win less almost in that instance, because the odds are better that team would win. So the Raiders, on the money line, you might see them at like, -150 or whatnot. And ultimately in that situation, you would have to bet 15, or you'd have to bet 150 in order to win $10 or 100. So that's just how the betting market works. And that's how it kind of evens the two teams. The odds are going to be greater for an underdog to win, which will give you a better payout than it would be for a favor. So one of the things I was talking about in my article is that, when the books make a number, let's say the Eagles are +3 against the Raiders. Again, we'll use that example. They'll open up at a number, and they will send that number out to the public on Sunday, late Sunday, early Monday. They'll open up that game, and then they'll move that line as they receive bets in either direction, right? So if all the money is coming in on one side, that line is going to move. So if they open the Eagles at +3 on Monday, and they're getting all Eagles money, then we could see that line get reduced to where the Eagles would be +2, +1, could be a pick 'em, depending on, how they need to adjust the line. So they're making the line for the game, and then they're kind of moving it based on, how people are betting it during the week. So when I was talking about in the article, like for instance, one of the things that we do as sports bettors is you try and kind of track the market. You want to get ahead of it. One thing that the public does in general is they'll hold too much weight on what they just saw. So like, for instance, we know the NFL is a league of parity, right? So, teams go up, teams go down, their level of performance isn't linear. They have good weeks, bad weeks, and a lot can factor into whether they have a good week or bad week. It could be injuries. It could be travel situation. They could be on a short week, could be coming off a bye. All these things play into team performance. So when you have a situation of where a team, in a situation like that, you could see the line move, from week to week. So if you target a team that played poorly the week, the public could be off that team. So you can see that team, really nobody wants to bet on. They're not taking a lot of money because of what they just saw. So one of the examples in the article that I used was the Miami Dolphins, right? Nobody's lower on any team in the NFL than the Miami Dolphins right now because they just lost to the Jaguars. Jaguars, absolute mess. Urban Meyer is a dumpster fire. They're wondering if he's going to make it through the season. And Miami goes down there and loses, plays them and loses their 5th straight game. And now Brian Flores is on the hot seat. So what happens is they shape these lines based on perception of what just happened as well, like recently. So a lot of people are going to be betting the other side. We're seeing in that game, Atlanta was initially an underdog. We're seeing them as the favorite now. So what I like to do sometimes if I see that, the lines are moving holding too much weight on what just happened, like, there's usually value on the other side because like we see in the NFL on a week-to-week basis, a team could look good one week and then they don't look as good the next week. So that was kind of the article was talking about targeting some teams that might have performed poorly recently, but there could be underlying reasons for that performance, right? Whether it's injuries, they could be getting healthy or whatnot, and then the line overreacts. So you want to kind of take advantage of that situation and back that team if they're getting a better price because the betting public is just completely off that team.
Yeah, I love it, man. I really thoroughly enjoyed that article. I learned a lot, even, like you said, the shift in line with Miami and the Falcons. Was really interesting that they went from the favorite to the underdog, really based off of recency bias. Just so you walked us through that, you walked us through the money line, which was helpful because I actually didn't know what money line was. I've been seeing it recently and was like, I don't know what this is. So thank you, my brother. That helps me. And so that transitions into the parlays, right? And so like, you can parlay, you can have a money line as a part of the parlay, prop bets are part of these parlays. What are parlays? What are prop bets? How can people start to sort of like chain these games or like these rushing yards or receiving yards or first time, scorer or anytime touchdown sort of bets together to be able to potentially make even more money?
Yeah, so the prop bets are, a situation of where you can bet on individual player performance, right? So, if a quarterback's going to throw for a certain amount of yards, obviously the sports books will do the research. They'll throw out the line that, reflects kind of what their projected or expected performance is. And you can get that you can do, whether it's total yards or receptions or completions or yardage or touchdowns. They have a line for everything. So there's odds on all that stuff. So if you're into fantasy, you use fantasy models. Those would be very handy, obviously, in doing those. Parlays are just betting that multiple bets are going to hit pretty much and getting increased odds because of it. So, what you'll see is we talked about the money line where you're just picking a team to win. You'll see people pick 3, 4, 5 teams and bet if all 5 of those things hit or if all 5 of those bets, hit, then, they would get increased odds, based on all the odds of all 5 of those hitting. Parlays are something that I typically don't do just because of we know in sports that, unexpected things happen, right? And it's hard enough to pick, the right side of a game or, it's hard enough to get one bet right. And when you're doing a parlay, you need all these different legs of the parlay to hit in order to get paid, which is why the odds are so high. But it's more of like a lottery ticket element to sports betting. You know what I mean? I know there's people that have a lot of success with it, and they can if you really, do your homework and know what you're doing. But it's hard enough. Like if you're just starting, it's hard enough to get one bet right. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of people get excited because of the big payout. That if they do get, all 5 legs of their parlay right, they're going to hit. But more times than not, it doesn't hit. And if you look at, the sports books will release their revenue earnings each month. And if you look, the money that they get off of parlays is by far greater than anything else. So it's like 80 times greater. Like it's astronomically greater. So they make all their money on parlays, which is why you see the promotions of the parlays. And that's why you see them, give you, boosts on parlays, and they'll do anything they can do to kind of get you to kind of bet these parlays, because again, your odds are it's hard enough to get one bet right. So if you're putting 2, 3, 4, 5 together, the odds are that you're going to lose. And if you're doing it recreationally and you just want to have, entertainment that way, that it's perfectly fine. But from a sports betting perspective, if you're really doing it seriously to where you want to try and make money, parlays are not the way to go about it. Like I said, it's the biggest revenue gainer for the sports books for a reason. It's because, they're very, very difficult to hit on a consistent basis.
Oh yeah, they got my parlay money this week. Yeah, my brother. I put like $20 up on parlays. I didn't come close, man. I'm betting the under on Henry going under 89 yards or something like that. He goes for 140. I'm like, I'm probably not playing parlays next weekend.
Like every now and then I might be like, okay, like I'm just going to like parlay these two props together and kind of see what happens here or whatnot. But I almost do it as like entertainment more than anything. Again, it's a much smaller percentage than when I put my, regular plays together on my card. But it can be fun, and if you're doing it for entertainment, it's fine. But it's just if that's how you're consistently betting and you're trying to make money, it's kind of like the trap, right? It's tough to kind of win consistently doing parlays.
Yeah, I got trapped, man. They're exciting though. It's for entertainment for me, like it adds another little element to watching the games. I only put like $5 up. It's not anything wild. Like I definitely, it's what you said. Like I budget out a certain amount per season, and then between my like FanDuel daily fantasy slates and then my parlays and my prop bets, I don't go over that budget. So whatever money I make, I might spend a little bit more, but once I hit zero, there's no more money going into that account. I'll leave it alone. So yeah, it definitely adds an entertainment element.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Set yourself a budget, and then, when you're out, you're out. Yeah, I mean, the parlays, they can be fun, and you can get some great odds on there, but, ultimately, like long term, it's very, very difficult to win that way. And it's the big revenue driver for the sports book. So that kind of tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, it does. I didn't know that. So I appreciate you. And anyone listening, I really want to harp on the fact that like, gambling and doing this, you need to do it responsibly. If you have a gambling addiction, definitely seek help. There are definitely organizations and folks out here that can help you. This is not me encouraging you to gamble. This is just a podcast offering you more information, right? Like, as this becomes more and more popular, the more information that you need or that you have, the better off you'll be, because you'll know if that's something for you or not, right? Like, Mark mentioned it, the parlays, don't get suckered in. They give you some great odds. Every time FanDuel's texting me and hitting me up with alerts, and now I understand why they just steal money from me, man. So, be wary, folks.
And that's the thing, you talk about gambling responsibly, and, the big indicator is that, if you feel like you need to win, then you're probably betting too much, right? And there's no real reason to get in that situation to where, like, if gambling stops becoming fun and you feel like you need to win, then it's time to step back and kind of reevaluate, whether it is, whether what you're doing is healthy and whether it's good for, yourself. You always got to take care of yourself and that kind of thing. So we all sweat out games. We all have fun. I've all sat up at night, watching the Sunday night game, staring at my TV, wondering if they're going to kick a field goal or knee the ball out, you know what I mean? And, we've all been there, but it's ultimately fun. When it comes to a point where you feel like you have to win, like, it's not okay if you lose, then it's not okay that you're betting.
Yeah, for sure, man. If you putting your house up, your car up, if you spending money that's supposed to be going to your kids' college fund, and your wife or your partner's gonna be on your neck in the morning if you lose, you've gone too far, right? You need to kind of reel it back. And again, there are definitely folks out here that offer all sorts of different supportive services to help you with any source of gambling or any source of addiction that you may have. So again, this is not necessarily, hey, Malcolm told me to go bet, as much as if you're going to bet, Malcolm wants to make sure he's bringing you folks on here that can really help you understand it. So Mark, I really appreciate it. I learned a lot today. That's going to inform how, I'm placing my bets moving forward, and, really making sure that it remains fun. And if it gets to a point where I feel it's like, damn, I have to win, I have to stop. So yeah, man, that's important to keep in mind for sure. Hey, so I'm really excited to announce the first ever advertiser for the Third Lab podcast. And of course, it's the homie Teddy Gandy and his team from Black's Apparel. Black's is a clothing company that focuses on Black reality, both past and present. They share daily Blacks or Black facts, quotes, and content regarding Black reality through their social media. So stop by the store at blacks.com, that's BLACTS.com, to check out the Blacks basic tees and all of their inventory. Blacks also uses its platform to collaborate with local artists, so keep an eye out for their limited edition tees and apparel. Make sure to use the promo code THIRDLAP for 10% off your first purchase. I mean, really, what you waiting for? Get the blacks.com, Third Lap, for 10% off your first purchase. Support the homie Teddy, support the podcast. Let's go. Go ahead, brother.
It's also realize, like, as far as like your expectations for winning, right? Like, you know, if you follow like professional sports bettors, right? Like the goal for them is to win 54% of the time, right? Because when you bet into these games, there's a hold, right? So you'll see like minus 110, and that means like you don't get the full amount that you bet. You know, the sports book holds some back. And that's kind of where those odds come out, is that like when you bet a game, because of that hold, the books have like a 53% chance of winning, and you have a 47% chance of winning because you're having to bet, you know, $11 to win 10 if it's minus 110, that sort of thing. So, you know, even the best sports bettors in the world that are professionals, like their goal is to win 54% of the time. So, like, you're not going to win, and that's what they need to do in order to you know, to make a profit. So, you know, you're not going to win 60, 70% of the time. Like that shouldn't be, you know, your expectations. And if you're doing it long term, that's not going to happen. So, you know, when you're, you know, betting and gambling and whatnot, you know, you need to make sure that, and listen, if you go through, you know I've had years when I was younger to where like, hey, if I go through, you know, 3 months of the season or whatnot, like let's say, you know, it's in February and it's the end of the year, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I broke even on the NFL. And if you're doing it for entertainment purposes, that's fine, because, you know, the value that you got from it was the entertainment. You didn't lose any money. So nothing wrong with breaking even, you know, nothing wrong with even losing a little. You know, if you lose, you know, a tiny percent of, you know, what you put in there over 3 or 4 months, you know, that's good for entertainment. You know, you had fun doing it, that's fine. It's just that, you know, your expectations of winning long term, if you're betting during a season or whatnot, you know, should be in line with, you're probably going to win, you know, if you're doing well, between, you know, 50 and 55, you know, 60% if you have a really good season. You know, that's really, you know, where you're going to land. And, you know, you're probably going to end up on the other side of it. You could end up down. That's why you make sure that the money that you have in there, if you're doing it for entertainment, is for that. And if it carries you through 3 or 4 months of the season, then that's good.
Absolutely. And so, Mark, where do you see this headed for you in the future? You know, you're doing certain things, you're writing articles, your voice is becoming more prominent within the sports betting world. You know, what are your goals for the next year, couple of years for yourself?
That's a great question. You know, I really don't know. I take it day by day, but I just want to keep producing content that, you know, people find value in, and, you know, jump on opportunities as they come. But you know, ultimately I would like to get to a position of where, you know, I could do it full time and I could do sports content full time, but not there yet. But, you know, you're going to keep plugging away and see what opportunities happen. And it's an interesting question when we talk about, you know, being in sports media for a career. Like, I remember having a conversation about somebody who was very close to a reporter. Right now, I'm not going to give out names or whatnot but, you know, that reporter kind of transitioned their life at an early age and was like, hey, I'm going to get into blogging, and, you know, I really like sports and this is what I want to do, you know, with my life or whatnot. And they ended up being successful. You know, they quit their day job. They became a very big, famous, you know, very successful reporter in their city. And I remember talking to that person and them saying, like, yeah, it's so weird because, like, everybody knows that person as this type of personality type, as a sports guy. But when I talk to him on a day-to-day, daily basis, he's completely different, and he never wants to talk about sports. And I thought that was so weird. And they went on to kind of talk about it, is because that's what he's doing all day. So, like, that's his job. That's part of what he is. And, you know, you run into that as well as you start, you know, gaining traction in, you know, the community and in sports media, and it becomes more of, you know, like a job than it is, you know, leisure or whatnot, or, you know, or a passion project. Is that, you know, when you're doing something day in and day out, and you keep grinding and you keep hustling, you approach it different, right? You approach it with a certain level of professionalism, but it becomes kind of like for writers, it becomes a little bit tough to kind of figure out, ways to start articles and way to close articles. And, when you're producing so much content, or if, for a podcaster, different topics, different segments they're going to be doing. When I was over the past 10 years, I was doing podcasts once a week, right? Well, it would be much different if I had to do a podcast every day, right? When you're talking about how do I find topics, how do I find, segments, how do I find ways to be entertaining and whatnot. So all that stuff is kind of interesting, is that it becomes a bigger part of your life. It's a lot of fun and it's great. And I feel blessed for the opportunities I have, but there are challenges that go with it too. You know what I mean? Like, it's not easy, producing content on a daily basis.
No, it is not. I struggle with it with this podcast. Like getting
Yeah.
the content out there on social media is tough. Consistently thinking of new things to share is hard. So yeah, I can certainly see, if it was an everyday sort of thing, you might get to a point where I'm not trying to talk about that topic, or like I'm not really trying to get too deep into that, which is sort of sad because I love sports so much that I would never want to get to a point where I don't want to talk about it off the air, or, not be paid to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it specifically. So that's sort of a difficult area, for sure, when you get into something that you love. And so, Mark, what's your motivation, man? What's your why? Right? Like you're a very intelligent person, very passionate. I'm sure that you could explore sports or other things. You said you've gotten into marketing and that's what your background is in, but you continue to chip away at this to find a career and a pathway here. What's the motivation for that? Why do you keep going the way that you are?
Yeah, I mean, I have two beautiful children, right, to keep me motivated every day. I have a beautiful wife, and the family is really where it all starts. When you talk about why and determination and that sort of thing, and what motivates you to do it. But in the sports media sense, it's just kind of, it's something that I wanted to do, that I felt like I could do well, and it's something where I felt like I could provide a lot of value for people, and that's really what it comes down to. And if you can do something that you love, and if that is sports, or in any other area, you want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what we're here for. Like, we're not really here to just wake up and do a 9 to 5 that we hate. Not that I hate my 9 to 5, right? Love, my day job, but it's, you really need to kind of have that in life. Like, it's really like we're here to kind of do what we want to do and what we feel like we're good at, and we can provide value to people. And that's really, what it's all about. And, I've loved sports my entire life, ever since I was a kid, and obsessed with it. So I feel fortunate to have that aspect, and to have a passion project like that kind of, turn into a little bit more, over the past couple of years is really exciting. So, but it really starts at home. My family, super supportive, like my wife, as far as, all the stuff I have to do with the weird times, radio hits and different streams and things of that nature. So, they're all incredibly understanding and very supportive. And it's really cool to see when those things, pay off. Like, I remember, my first time being on the radio with Fox Sports The Gambler, and, my family just so excited. My family, my extended family, they're like, wow, you're on the radio. It's so incredible. And then, from when I was hired by Yahoo Sports and started writing for them, again, incredibly to see that. Things about a month ago, I did an interview for the Sharp app with Cheddar TV, with Cheddar News. They have a new show, Cheddar Bets. And that was a very, very cool experience. It was a very awesome experience to do that. Learned a lot during the interview, and going through that experience. So when you see those things happen and they kind of take hold, it's awesome and very rewarding, because, we all put a lot of hard work into ourselves and our projects in this industry. And a lot of times it doesn't, pay off immediately, but it was also rewarding in the sense that I know so many people have given up so much to kind of support me along the way. And it feel like, in a way, it's kind of paying it back to them, being like, hey, you know what, like this is the result. Like, we got something done here. And it really brings, your successes. It really brings like a team element to it, because, nobody gets here alone, and we all support each other, and we all kind of, support each other along the way, whether it's at home or in the sports industry, in your circle, in your environment. So, that stuff is very important, but that's the why. It all starts at home and it branches out from there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it. And so quick 2-minute segment here called the motivational thoughts for the people. And so,
Mhm.
if folks only locked into this part of the podcast for some reason, what are some like motivational sort of words that you would provide to people that are maybe looking to get into the sports industry, looking to get into sports betting specifically, or really just looking to figure out what their why is or what their passion is in life?
Yeah, it's a great one. Just keep going. Like that's the thing, and keep going and keep trying to figure out, a way to keep going if it's something that you really want, something you really believe in. Like when I started, 10 plus years ago doing podcasts, I never in a million years thought that, hey, I'd be writing for Yahoo Sportsbook and I'd be on the radio and doing these things. And I still have a long way to go. You know what I mean? But, the grind is real, and it can get monotonous at times, and there's times where you feel like you're just doing it and talking to yourself or writing to yourself, and but just keep going, keep trying to figure out ways to do creative things, right? That was one of the things that is very important. If somebody gives you a platform, use it and try and think of content that you can do that differentiates yourself, that you can show somebody else. So one of the things I did with phillyinfluencer.com, that was a writing opportunity for me. I was like, okay, so I did a Futures Face-Off series last year, which kind of took two teams in the NFL and pit them against each other and talked about their odds on the season going forward, and evaluated those two teams and talked about which one was the better bet or investment going into the season. So I did that with about, I want to say 20 of the 32 teams. It was kind of like a weekly series that I put together. And that is what I had sent to Yahoo Sports and said, hey, listen, like if you're looking for betting content, this is what I created. This is sort of something I could do if it's a fit. And I sent it to, several people, but, that one person saw it, they liked it, and they said, hey, you know what, let's give you an opportunity. And the rest is history. But that's kind of my main thing is if you have a platform, try and figure out creative ways to do different things that you can kind of show somebody else. Every time you're on the mic or every time you put, you're typing up a new article or whatnot, think of it as an audition. Like, hey, how do I put something together that I can show someone else that says, hey, this is a reflection of the work that I can do?
Yeah, I love it, man. Be creative, think outside the box, but also just keep going. And I can relate to that. You feel like you're talking to yourself. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself on this podcast, but then people chime in, random people hit me up sometimes and be like, yo, I really got a lot out of that. Family, friends, extended family, folks will chime in with me and just let me know that like this is motivation that they need, which is motivation that I need also to keep going, right? Because you just never know how it's resonating with people.
Yeah, and it's the most important thing because you can, I mean, let's be honest, right? Like you could do a podcast or you could write articles, right, for 3 years. Nobody could listen, right? But it doesn't really matter until that one person listens. You know what I mean? And once that one person listens that's going to give you an opportunity, then that's really what matters. So if you stop going, that person's never going to hear it. When I started podcasting, I was super obsessed with the numbers. Well, how many downloads do we get? How many, but it doesn't really matter unless it's the right people that are listening, right? And that sort of thing. And past performance isn't predictive of future performance. Like if you just keep working hard, keep trying to be creative, ultimately, do your best to get it in front of the right people, and hopefully something happens. But it's never going to happen if you quit. So you got to keep moving, and that's the important thing, because there were several years where I was like, man, I feel like this is just going nowhere and I'm just doing this to do it. And then boom, you get the right opportunity or the right person listens. And then, then you have your opportunity and you use those previous times. Like I said, pretend it's an audition, it's just reps getting better, honing your craft. And that way, when the opportunity does present itself, you're ready, to deliver.
Yeah, 100%, Mark. And so, thank you, my brother, for joining me today. We're getting close to the end. We ran our lap. If folks want to learn more about you, connect with you on social media, learn more about sports betting, any of the work that you're doing, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. Just follow me on Twitter. It's really the best place, at @X_Drumheller. That's really where the majority of my content is at. Follow me on there. DMs are open, so hit me up if you have any questions. I'll definitely respond to you. But that's really the best place. I have an Instagram page. It's at @Drumheller, no underscore on Instagram. But really, I'm just posting pictures. That's Instagram. It's not really that's not where the meat of the content is. So everything's on Twitter. Just hit me up there.
Yeah, definitely follow Mark at X_Drumheller on Twitter. Shares a lot of great content. Really just awesome all around dude, man. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the past several years. Thank you again for joining me today on the third lap, my brother. I really appreciate it. And so any last words that you want to share before we log out?
No, not really. Just, like I said, everyone out there, it's a crowded space. Sports media is kind of nuts. You know what I mean? And it can be, challenging at times. And there's going to be times where you feel like it's, it's tough to break through. You know what I mean? But just keep going and network with the right people. Network with people. Be kind to people. That's another main thing. You see a lot of people on social media kind of ripping other people, and it's really none of that is important. You know what I mean? Like none of that's going to get you to your goal. So just kind of be kind to people, be supportive, pay it forward, and keep going. That's really the main thing. Just keep going and believe in yourself. Keep producing content, and do the best you can. And then at least whatever happens, whatever it turns out, you have no regrets.
Absolutely. And so listen, Mark, again, thank you so much, my brother. I appreciate you for joining me on another episode of the Third Lap Podcast. Again, this is your host, Mal Davis, signing out. Each one, teach one. We all learn together. Peace. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Third Lap Podcast. This is your host, Mal Davis. Please visit thethirdlappodcast.com for more information about the podcast, about our guests, and also to see our reading list. You can find us at The Third Lap Podcast on LinkedIn and Facebook, at Third Lap on Twitter, and at third_lap_podcast on Instagram. If you know anyone that would be great to be featured on this show, please reach out to our host, Mal Davis. He's always looking for interesting people to learn more about them and to talk about their pathway. Thank you so much again. Have a good one.